Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm, I'm excited to be at this point and talk through the case study. I suppose starting off before examining, the details of the niche and the kind of problems we went to approach here. It was really interesting to examine, my principles, I suppose, as someone in product and what I valued. And I appreciated the emphasis from you, Henry, in sort of saying, make these your own, because, I could look at the original list and feel like they all related. They all make sense. I agree with them all, right? But there was an exercise here to say there's probably no wrong answer. But what are the values? And I think I ended up sort of perhaps expressing more of my own unique value proposition in product. And so I came up with these, and the arrows in this sense are more kind of over, right? Or more than. So listening over speaking, I think it's just a really powerful place to start. It's something I think at the core of what I'm interested in and inclined towards in product, but in business in general. Honestly, I think that applies. And linked to that, questions over statements, being curious rather than being being curious rather than being wise. Maybe to put it. Fascinated by problems first. I really felt in this third line that's a discipline as much as it is a principle. For me,
good point.
Is sticking towards that left-hand side of that equation. Feedback over assumptions. Again, just like that obsession with the customer and the customer insight rather than our lens of the customer. Speed over perfection. What did I mean here? I mean, failing fast, being willing to go out with something, ugly baby, if you like, to get feedback and iterate rather than, this constant search, which I can really see the trap of, oh, we're not quite there yet. We're not ready. Just wait, hold on. That's not,
A year later.
Exactly. I'm sure that's something you can relate to as well. Honesty over pride. Could have put this one on the top of the list, really, but I just feel like in those interactions with customers, prospects, user groups, like, are you honestly, I realized that this was a big value as much as a principle of saying, do I represent my interest and my curiosity in them genuinely? And do I also represent, and let's say you're at a concept or solution stage, am I representing the capabilities of that with honesty? And rather than versus dishonesty, I felt like the counter was actually pride here, right? Being more pride driven. And that's, again, I think that's, that's also has an element of discipline to it, swallowing your pride and things and being willing to say, yeah, it is an ugly baby, but we've got it out there so we can learn from you.
Yeah.
So process, I really, the process that we went through here, I love the top end of this funnel. Like that's really where I get a lot of energy from. Really listening, understanding, exploring. I really enjoyed the beginning of this process in terms of just going out there and asking people what kind of problems they'd encountered recently. I was amazed at the lists that people sent through. I had one person send me 25 line items of problems, and that was just fun. It was just really good fun. I like the just sort of the tweak in the headspace to start back to that first page, right, of problem over solution. Just to be attuned, to be in situations and recognize. It's mindfulness, I suppose. If you to put your finger on anything, to be just like, I'm aware, I'm in this moment, I'm listening. Oh, I actually feel uncomfortable right now, or, oh, that's really frustrating me, and actually capturing that moment, like just the quick, or when you're seeing it in someone else's life as well. So I love the top end of this funnel. And the validation is great. I definitely had some friction there in terms of developing what I would call a critical mass of a user pool to test with. but it was not difficult at all to find people who related to the niche, who were in the niche or have been in the niche and related to the problems. So it was friction in terms of I took on a niche that was female, and it was about women helping women, in the end. It was a little tricky outside of my immediate network to tap into that niche with sort of acceptance of me.
Yeah.
But
it's
I
good
think
learning there, isn't it, around this sort of, yes, there is a need for credibility, but also it doesn't stop you going into that space, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think with a little bit more thought about that approach, rather than just sort of trying to join a women's, or mothers group and then posting some message for, request for, I think it's more around really getting that identification with the problem out there first.
Yeah.
And just, you're just going to pick up one or two who just go, oh yeah. It's that kind of emotional connection with what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
The experiment with the no-code solution for me, in the end, whilst I did play with the bubble landing page, which we can have a quick look at, I've really used Typeform and Slack as the kind of, both bit of an onboarding flow, and I actually felt that was part of the product, and I can explain that a little bit later. A key part of the product, rather than, I did not spend the time in this case to develop a fully fledged digital solution. That was partly because of my solution ended up more being around a network of which there are off-the-shelf options there.
Yep.
And learning is, reality is I'm still in that stage right now. But again, this is great feedback time. It's what we live for in product. Investing in the long term. I think I sort of respond to that in a couple of ways. First of all, if I was to run with this problem space, this niche area, I think I would have to look inside me and find the connection and the devotion to this niche and this audience with a desire to really help. But there's no shortage of, need and therefore kind of potential features that could be rolled out for sort of long-term duration. So I'll move on. This is you've seen this before, but the problem statement from the first experiment was, we believe that mums returning to the workforce are currently frustrated by a lack of support. Their ideal situation is to find stable, long-term employment. The nice bit about, the sort of validation of this was even keywords I put out in my hypothesis were validated, I think, in the first user interview. There was just this like hotspot of network, support, isolation, and also around need. Like I need to get a job. I need, and those are all quite emotive words. So if anything, it was hard not to put more of that in this problem statement and to keep it concise. So lack of support could have been any number of things, really, but that was what I felt encapsulated the emotional state of the niche well enough. So that's why I ran with that. And the ideal situation is to find stable long-term employment. And you helped sort of draw that out in conversation, and it was that ultimately is the goal behind the goal. So we believe that returning to the workforce after having children is a real acute problem. So in order to test this, we went out and did 5 user interviews, of which one I recorded, and then developed, analysis of the kind of feedback that was received in that process. And as I said, a lot of those keywords were affirmed very quickly. What it also brought out was, whilst the hypothesis was validated, whilst I was able to relate to the emotional state of the niche with really high accuracy, it was also an area where people were free to talk about. Like, again, this is quite an emotional period for a mother deciding to go back to the workforce. It was easy to get people talking, but it brought up a whole bunch of other pain points. And I found that was an interesting experience for me, because there was a discipline in staying on point and not going, oh, that's quite interesting. How do we solve that problem?
Because even there's a problem goal behind the goal around, it's not just, okay, I need a job, it's long-term job. And then, that's tied to purpose, right? Sense of self and things as well. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I came in, again, going back to that discipline of not jumping to solution. I will be totally candid and admit, in the back of my head, there was this desire to improve the job application process. Like I don't think I'd be the first person to say it's not optimal. And I had some concepts in my head, but what came out in these first, no one validated that at all. It was all about their feelings during this period, and this lack of connectivity, this isolation. It wasn't about, I hate putting my CV in and writing a CV. I'm sure if I asked that question and led them in, everyone would have said, it's terrible. Yeah, don't like it. But no one freely brought that up. And that was surprising and interesting for me, but also confronting, but led to this focus on the network rather than the kind of, any digital solution.
Yeah.
So hypothesis 2, we help mums returning to the workforce achieve stable long-term income with a trusted online network. So in order to do that, build a simple landing page with a survey to kind of capture and qualified leads, I suppose, and validate the minimum viable offer as a foundation for our vision. So you can see here a screenshot of the Typeform survey and the landing page. Now, I had, I think, 15 to 20 clicks onto the survey. I think I had 4 completions overall. And, interestingly, I think 3 out of 4 responses were from female recruiters. I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously, it's a small sample set, hard to read anything into it directly. But clearly that is almost a sub-niche of the niche, because these are people who are already plugged into job postings, job sites, finding people, and yet they were the ones clicking to express they related to the pain, which I thought is fascinating.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, so you could see you go even more specific, right, and start with that subgroup.
Another thing I'd say, I learned from this process with the survey. The surveys was kept deliberately quite open. You see the typical question, what is the main challenge you're facing at the moment? There's no leading in, right? There's very little. There was the statement, the vision statement at the beginning of the survey, which was clearly had a clear impact on click-throughs, because my hypothesis there is what happened was a lot of men were clicking on the survey. Initially, they then see the, we help mums return to the workforce. They dropped off.
Yeah. Good. This is what, good lesson there is you have to be extremely careful with data, right? It's easy to look at percentage, so many people are dropping off, but actually when you look into it, in many cases, there's a logical answer, such as 50% men clicking through, for example. Yeah,
I'd be fascinated to look at the breakdown of my LinkedIn connections by gender, because I posted on LinkedIn and I had 3 or 4 friends repost organically.
Nice.
Which was great. But I'd be interested on the breakdown of mine and how predominantly, it is. I'd be interested to sort of overlay that as well. But okay, moving on. So validated product vision. I don't think we've discussed this one together yet, but I wanted to keep this focused on the network and also the support. So that's how Support Network was born here. And that's the key. The most trusted is a vision statement. And I having examined the competitors out there, including, large established people in this space like LinkedIn, as an example, or in Australia, Seek.com and things like that, which are, more about job listings. Of course, LinkedIn has the largest sort of profile and network aspect to it as well. But the focus here was on this. What differentiator was the trust as well. And that would be, I think, a very interesting, that would be a very interesting specific to survey around, from a competitor analysis perspective, of where, if anywhere, are people experiencing trust in those? How do they find it? How do they rank it? And why is it not there? So the most trusted career support network. So moving on to the next hypothesis, we obviously wanted to take some form of demonstration. And in my case, I created another type form, and I wasn't doing wireframes. I was pursuing this sort of non-digital solution, using off-the-shelf networking program in terms of Slack, experimented with Bubble as well as a landing page, opted for Slack, because I also felt like the type form element to this, there was something that came up around this trust concept that I went back to, one or two of the people who completed the user interviews at the beginning, and established that there was in order to get trust, they felt like they needed to belong to something. And in order to belong to something, we sort of, there's all sorts of associated things with that, whether it's, security, privacy, there's a registration aspect to that. But so I wanted to, I felt like the actual onboarding was a key part of the product to filter out. So to almost challenge people of, this is what you're coming in here for. Do you accept this? This essentially almost like a code of conduct. And so Typeform is perfect for that because of the staged, questions. And I really wanted to achieve, that at least one person in this experiment was going to click through to subscribe to the Slack channel. We also did a customer journey map here, which, broadly speaking, from a very generic overview, we start in this sort of isolation and feelings of being alone. And I've put in 100 job applications, nothing's happening. And this step to kind of, okay, well, I'm going to search for jobs that are deliberately targeting women, or I'm going to look for, mothers working groups and things. And they discover this community, and they discover in it a language of belonging that resonates with them and their current position. The code of conduct that they experience as part of this onboarding actually drives them further to register and subscribe, because it touches right on those kind of, that desire to find a trusted network where they can be honest about their situation, and receive candid, helpful advice. If I was to extend into further experiments here, I would love to be working with a user group where we can actually have an OKR which tests, the first time they offer to help someone else in the network.
Good.
So there's this cycle. But anyway, you can see here sort of these delighted stages of I've just received advice. I've just received, advice from, a kind of mentor relationship. It could just be peers on there in a similar position of people all wanting to help each other. I went indoor climbing for the first time last week, Henry, and I'd never done it before. It was really good fun, bouldering. And I've never been part of such a convivial sport atmosphere in my life.
Yeah,
like
it's weird community vibe. Yeah.
Super hipster. Like you could just leave a bag of gold in the entrance and no one would touch it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was remarkable. And that is the essence, I think, to, maybe a little bit less hipster, but that is the essence that I'm trying to get at here and touch this sort of degree of trust, advice, encouragement. Hey, put your foot up here. Why don't you try putting your left hand up there? And like for that to be one of the first experiences of the women in this network, I think would be really powerful. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. The core value of our product is support. Let's have a little look here. So again, this is a screenshot of the Typeform sort of onboarding process, and you can see here a hint at that code of conduct element I'm speaking about. Do you recognize that this is a safe place where your words and actions have meaning to the lives of those around you? So it's sort of saying, hey, you're coming into a meaningful place here. You're going to have people who are intentionally, offering their input to you and your goals. But it's doing it by flipping on its head and saying, do you realize you're coming in and you're going to impact all these other people as well from the get-go? In summary, I suppose, had no difficulty really in finding strong validation with the pain points associated with the niche in these kind of HXCs, right? It wasn't hard to find this group who identified with it, isolated, wrong type of support. I've changed now. My requirements have changed. I now need flexible working conditions as well. So in terms of a survey, surveyed at this point a single user who fit this target, which means segmentation wasn't quite required. But if I was to extend out to the rest of my early adopters in this user group, then that would become more relevant. Obviously, as such, analysis is a little bit limited unless I extend that survey base. But it became clear, I suppose, that from the feedback to that survey, that there was a sense of urgency that I hadn't quite captured. So that whilst people want support and network and this community, it doesn't allow for the fact that in some cases, going back to that first set of user interviews, I have a need for work. I have a need to be employed. And so for those people, they want more of a direct path to finding jobs and finding roles that may not always go down the sort of, let's say, self-development, slightly medium-term route. And I hadn't really captured that yet. So I think that was an important bit of feedback from that survey. Implement jobs to be done. There was this sense of, I suppose I was aware that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, application. There's this need to sort of still allow for people to have their identity elsewhere. They're still going to be applying for jobs. I'm not replacing the job application process. So, but what is the value of, is there a value in being a member of this group from a status perspective, to show, typically, people might put on their LinkedIn profile, like I'm a volunteer member of a board, or I'm a mentor, to young men in my area, or I suppose tapping into that to allow there to be some sort of, I don't want to say prestige, that's the wrong word, but connection with value in representing this as saying, I'm part of this community and it means something. That's unvalidated, but something to explore. What is validated is this sort of access to recruiters directly through the community. And I think that was very interesting, also layering over the fact that it was recruiters who responded to the public survey. And so bringing them into the mix and understanding, the typical normative business connections people have with recruiters and allowing them to do their job better as well as a stakeholder that I hadn't really considered in this yet.
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting, that's really interesting space you can look at, right? It's like, how do you, can you bring in recruiters within this sort of support framework? And interesting to think about.
And then lastly, I wanted to get connected to jobs more quickly. I'm here, I'm in, this is great. I'm desperate to find companies that meet my needs, roles that meet my needs. How do I do that? And at the moment in the support network that we're starting with, not really answering that. So I think that's a really interesting space to examine. About me.
Sorry, you didn't need to do this slide.
Excellent. Well, that's the end of my case study, Henry.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, sorry, the about is more for, I think, if you're sending this out to people as a sort of like PDF, but awesome. Really good actually. So I think comments first on the presentation and then general comments, I think, from the 8 weeks. So good tone. I think, you always present quite well. So I think that was really nice. Start was a bit, because obviously it's a slightly artificial context. It's a bit like not nervous, but a bit stilted at the beginning, but generally very good tone, like nice and conversational. Again, it's not like a formal presentation, right? In any context that you use this, I think just nice to be talking through the ideas. I think you could have stayed a bit higher level on a few things. I think, thinking about this in the context of, say, you're bringing in the process to a team or, interviewing, for example, people's attention span is terrible. So trying to stay high level, or say if you're doing it in team context, maybe zooming in on one specific area, for example, depending on where you're at in the process. But I mean, that's a small thing. Principles, really nice. I think you really made them your own. I think some really profound was a word I wrote down for like some of the ones about sort of honesty over pride, these kind of things, so important to being a good product leader. They're not talked enough about. So I think really nice to see that. Problem statement, good, crystal clear. It felt like a bit of like a call to arms, right? It's a really well written. And I think, again, it's the kind of thing that further down the line or, the more senior you get, like getting that right is massive because it informs everything that the whole company does, right? The direction. So being like words matter in that context. I think really, really strong start there. USP, really good. Again, you sort of got what we're trying to teach really, which is this, looking at a problem objectively and seeing that there's something wrong with how it's currently being solved. This idea of sort of connectedness, trustworthiness, really, really nice to see that. And again, you double down on it, which is exactly what we suggest doing. I think MBO, so you introduced it, you didn't really explain, obviously, like I know what the MBO is, but I think if you're pitching this internally, like this is a new concept. So I think just pausing to explain, here's what I did. So rather than building a solution, we tested out what we call a minimal viable offer, which is essentially like a statement of value.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise people are like, well, like, what is this thing? It sounds like you're sort of just repeating.
Yeah, my mind was not in that context of this presenting it.
Exactly, it's fine. But I think just something, something longer term. Sorry,
totally get what you're
back in, explain. I think when it came to the PMF, I felt you probably should have talked about it as next steps. I felt because you sort of said I've sort of done it with one person, which is fine. But you could say I would personally have said, so I tried it with tried a small outreach campaign, didn't get enough people through. So what I'm going to do next, aim to get 10 people through the funnel, and then what I would do is survey, segment, etc. And then final point, summary. Good. I think good to sort of tie everything together, right? Recap what you've covered. So generally very good. Great tone. I think could have stayed a bit more high level, but actually very, very, very good generally. Like,
yeah. So if I was to go and deliver this internally, it would be a much more of a focus on the process rather than my specific case study.
Also on selling it. So it's like, why should people care about this thing that you're introducing? It's like, hey, here is it. So same thing we teach, right? What's the problem, desired outcome? Ultimately, like building better products, which means more revenue, lower costs. So I think couching everything in those kind of, again, why are we doing the MBA? Because it's going to save us 6 months of building something that probably doesn't make sense. So I think just putting it in terms that are relevant to whoever's listening. General points, I think, from the program. I think, fun, like really fun working together. I think I've enjoyed like all of our sessions. I think in terms of concrete things, I think really nice to see you keeping up with everything, like even being in Australia, even having kids, doing this at whatever time it is there now at 9-10 p.m. Your son going to hospital, all of these things came up, and I think you stuck with it, which is great to see. And I think also considering that you're relatively new to product, I think just being super persistent without the support that everyone in Europe has, right, being on the live sessions. So I think that's really, if you persist with product, then you're only going to do well. I think if you stick with these kind of things and you use that persistence to take what we've learned here and then roll it out in your company, you will 100% see results from that. I think also rewarding for me to see that I had a call with Luke earlier, similar point. You really get what we've tried to teach, which is these things like, it's as much about sort of honesty and openness as it is about things like, changing from a solution mindset to a problem mindset, understanding, trying to look at the problem behind the problem or the goal behind the goal, in your words. So really nice to see that. And I think also just not being held back by things like, yes, ideally we have 100 people in a user pool to work with, but it's fine. You're getting the learning right in your specific case, going through the steps, going through the process, so that you just roll it, repeat. You're going to get very, very good at that quite soon. I think final point, just on the solution, we talk about no coding, but really the goal of the prototype is any way that's going to validate your assumptions, right? So Typeform and Slack are completely fine, probably a much better solution than anything custom you could build, even with a big dev team over a year. So I think just always remembering that, why do we build something? It's to prove, really to prove an assumption. Only way further down the line do we even think about building like a custom application, for example. Generally, I think that persistence, like stick with that. I think keep revisiting what we've covered. I think it's just going to keep reinforcing these really, really key principles and concrete processes that you can, use to ultimately deliver better products.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Really appreciate that. From a personal goal, I repeat what I said before. I'm really hoping to run it again. I'll probably, no doubt, I expect to pick something new in terms of niche, good variety, right? And try, whether I do it over 6 weeks or 10 weeks, I'm not sure, but just to run it again and see how that experience is different, because I can do certain things even quicker, right? Like I don't need to work week on week. The first 3 weeks I can probably do in 10 days if I really
that's a really good point, is I think when you get good at this kind of stuff, like you can go straight in with a USP and just see put it out there and see what happens, whilst then gathering feedback in the background to sort of inform that a bit better. The reason we don't do that with students is because you need to, as you've learned, right, you need to go in very objective to start really going like, wow, there's so much value in a conversation when you go in sort of objective and open. That's the sort of learning that we want to emphasize. But you can go very quickly afterwards.
I'm keen to stay part of the community on Slack, and I might, hopefully, if I stick with that, Bud, and I go through that, I'll share my results from it. as a second round. It might be useful for someone else in there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we're going to be doing these monthly AMAs, so Ask Me Anything, monthly workshops as well. So the more we expand out into your part of the world as well, I'll make sure that we're offering a few of the live sessions at a better time as well.
Yeah,
beyond that,
absolutely.
you can post questions and I'll cover those in the AMA and then just send you the replay as well. That's
great. Please do send me that article. The recording. I think you were saying when that comes out.
Yeah, put it on my to-do list.
And then the other one was, there's quite a few Q&As and workshops that I haven't caught up with. Not sure how many weeks, probably at least 3 or 4 weeks. Where I've either seen one or neither. Are there any ones that you just highly recommend I go and listen to the recording of?
Workshops or Q&As?
Well, I mentioned both there, I suppose, but I mean, perhaps workshops is more applicable.
I think in terms of the workshops, the new one I'll be sending through, I think is going to be really, really powerful. Linked to the hero's journey from week 6.
Yep. Yeah.
Really
actually was
we got like 9.3 out of 10 for that for MP. So it's like people really enjoyed that one.
That's great.
Customer journey, I think you've done that well. No, I think those two, and then Q&A is too hard to remember, to be perfectly honest. But
yeah. Well, the Q&A is a bit more abstract.
Week 1 to 3 is where we have usually the sort of the biggest questions. After that, it becomes quite specific.
Yeah, I think those are the ones I've listened to already,
yeah,
so that's good.
I think the best thing to do actually is revisit the core curriculum, and the Hero's Journey workshop, I think, is also worth looking at. Would be my suggestion. Awesome.
Excellent.
Nice one. Well, anyway, it's been a really, really fun doing the program. And as I said, we're going to make sure we keep the community going. So I'm sure we will see each other on a session coming soon.